Cyber Uncut. Discover the changing face of business, government and national security as Australia navigates the cyber revolution.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cyber Uncut. My name's David Hollingworth. I am the deputy editor of the website Cyber Daily. I am joined by my colleague
Daniel Croft. Hello.
He does, in fact, know who he is. That is fantastic.
Yeah, it took me a second there.
There's a slight pause. You got away with it quite well, I thought.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, so we're here to talk about the week in cybersecurity and cybercrime in Australia. And after a couple of breaks, we're going to have a special guest on board, which I'm really excited about. However, let's get to the nitty-gritty.
The meat and potatoes.
The meat and potatoes.
Yep.
I like that one. Cabs. Taxis.
Yeah, 1-3 cabs.
They came after our taxis.
Yeah, well, look, big company 1-3 cabs, you know. If you've been in a cab in Sydney or, you know, one of the major cities of Australia, you have probably been in a 1-3 cab.
I've been in 13 cabs.
13 cabs specifically.
Really? It's 1-3 cabs?
Yeah, it is definitely 1-3 cabs because I remember the ads. It was 1-3 cabs will get you there.
Oh, you're right. I hate that. Okay, cool. Carry on. Yeah.
So I spotted this story. I believe it was, I forget who actually ran this originally, but it was not us. So 1-3 cabs, they also run the Silver Service taxi service, another really, really big one. On March 28, declared that it had detected some of its user accounts for 1-3 cabs and Silver Service were potentially compromised through a sophisticated, unauthorized type of suspicious activity, which is a great way of saying we don't know exactly what it is.
Also, like, potentially compromised, but if there was a compromise, it was sophisticated.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
I think it's a bunch of buzzwords to make sure we're covering all bases here.
Yeah, true. Also, let's just say, I mean, they probably came across really harsh, but
it did a bit, yeah.
But, you know, these are really difficult things to... You see suspicious activity on your network.
Yeah.
And if you're smart, you lock it down.
Yep.
And then you go, if you're really smart, you actually disclose it. You go, whoa, this happened. You want to talk about it. You want to be open about it. And then you investigate. And then hopefully once you've dialed that in, you disclose.
I think this is also a case of, they've done the early disclosure as is recommended, as is actually required by law. And they, you know, investigations are still ongoing. They've given us what they can. So let's, we'll bring it back a second. We're not bashing them for this. But anyway, so look, we don't know how many accounts were affected. They said it's about 1.1% of all accounts, roughly, they estimate to have been affected. And there's over 1 million people who've downloaded the app. Not necessarily have accounts, but it's a pretty significant portion of the Australian population.
Do you use the app? Because
I Uber now.
Yeah, you see, I still use the app. And the thing is, like, you don't need an account to use it.
No.
But, of course, it's easier if you have, because you can store your
credit card information.
Details.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those ones. So, look, 1-3 cabs forced a reset of all the affected accounts. And then I believe there was a second thing that they saw. Hang on.
I think there was. But there's no evidence that credit card details have been involved with this at all.
No. So they've said that usernames, some of which include real names they specified. So obviously if you set your username to Daniel.Croft13 or something like that, your real name is now in your username. Something that doesn't usually get revealed in a disclosure, but I like that they've done that. Addresses, phone numbers, and for some, eligibility for the taxi subsidy scheme.
Oh, and is that going to be disadvantaged people?
Yes.
Oh.
Those who need a cab to get around and they get it subsidized.
So we're talking like aged pensioners and
people with disabilities, things like that.
Oh, that's right.
But they did confirm no credit card or bank account information was exfiltrated, which is nice. It is currently working with technical and legal experts, all of that. OAIC been informed, law enforcement informed. But in our own investigation, we don't know who's behind it. And I wrote this up a few days ago now. Still no one's claimed it.
And that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
At any point in time, Dan and I will we might break the initial hack, or because other news organizations have larger pools
Research
of
teams
or one of our aims is to always find when somebody claims the hack, and we're tracking a lot of those hacks at the moment. Brighton's, we're waiting for that to drop, which inevitably will. And I think with 13 cabs is going to be the same. We're going to keep looking out for this one for a while.
I think so. Look, not much has been revealed since their statement.
Yeah.
When I said that I saw something else, I don't believe they did. But 1.1% of all accounts is what they expected. Expect to have been compromised.
Yeah.
Which is pretty considerable. They're doing all the right things. This isn't something to attack them over, as we've established. But pretty shocking one. Pretty big company, and
pretty essential company for a lot of people as well. I mean, as you said, you use Uber. I don't. Maybe that's a generational thing. But a lot of older people. God, I'm not talking about myself. I really am. Uber is weird. I don't know why. But also, people older than myself are going to trust cabs over Uber.
To me, Uber is cheap. Well, it's not cheap. It's cheaper. I actually use DD, which is another thing like Uber, but it's cheaper again.
Are they endorsing this podcast? You getting money right now?
I wish. I wish. No, just to level that out. DD, you take too long to arrive. There you go. But anyway.
Okay. That feels like a great time to take a break. We'll be back in a very, very short moment. Okay, I think we're done bashing taxi companies for now. I'm David Hollingworth. My colleague is Daniel Croft. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so we're going to get to a couple of meaty stories here. And unfortunately, Signalgate still has some fallout. Not necessarily Signal related. All I'm going to say, what about his emails?
Yeah, so, there's been some government email scandals, some slammed by the, many of what is now the Trump administration. We're talking about Crooked Hillary.
Yeah.
But now,
lock her up.
Mike Waltz, the same man that added a journalist to a private Signal chat that disclosing strikes on Yemen by the US, has since been reportedly called out for using his own private Gmail account for government matters.
I mean, haven't we all used our own private Gmail account for government? No, we have not.
No. Have I occasionally got a PR reach out to me on my own email? Yes, and I hate it. But
actually, it really is hateful. Yes, we were talking about this just the other day.
Yeah.
I was copied in with my work email, and yours was
my own email address,
and it just was so incongruous.
Yeah.
Like, how did they find your?
Yeah.
Anyway,
just mine's on the site. Go to that one.
Yeah.
But yes,
it's the same format. First name dot last name momentummedia.com.au.
Yes.
It's not hard.
Yeah. But anyway, we don't discuss national security at a government level. We aren't responsible for the national security of a major or any country, let alone one that is arguably the most powerful in the world.
Or the specific military operations thereof, yada,
yada.
Yeah.
Mike Waltz, however, he is, funnily enough. So it turns out that one of his aides used a consumer-level Gmail account to discuss highly technical conversations with colleagues at other government agencies involving sensitive military positions and powerful weapon systems relating to an ongoing conflict. Now, that wasn't Waltz himself, but Waltz does represent those who work for him.
I mean, to be fair, an ongoing conflict in 2025 could mean anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Think about where the US may have its own powerful weapons.
I know, yeah. I'm trying to find an upside to this, and I'm failing.
Well, it does get worse because Waltz. It's not just his staffer that has done this. Waltz himself received, albeit less sensitive but potentially exploitable information, such as work documents and schedules, to his own private Gmail account.
Somewhere there is a Secret Service agent having an aneurysm over this.
Yeah.
Scheduling?
Yeah. Yeah, like, okay, I know where he will be and at what time. The National Security Advisor of the US. Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah.
So this was the Washington Post that reported this first, and they cited it from 3 government officials that were unnamed, as well as some documents. And those government officials called this handling of information problematic.
That's a polite way of
it's an understatement.
Yeah.
And this is something that, like, emails aren't like this safe thing. One, Gmail and email services like that are not cleared for this kind of thing, obviously. But, like, threat actors target emails, as we've seen so many times. 2020 election, Joe Biden's presidential campaign staff were targeted by phishing attacks by Chinese threat actors. Same for the Trump administration, but by Iranian threat actors.
And then, of course, let's just talk about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
What about her emails?
Oh, how dare she? The same people who called her out for this, for using a private email server.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was ironic after the Signal thing, but they wanted a more direct irony, I feel, because that's what's happened.
How can we make this worse?
Yeah, how can we make...
And then, we're not even going to go into the Venmo accounts, which are apparently open out there, and...
I was saying before, as you know, if there was a laugh track on this, it'd be a sitcom. Like, it is... I thought I'd get past the point of, are you serious? And it's not happened yet.
The fact is, they think they're serious, but they're also deeply comedic.
Yeah.
Man, you and I are never getting to the US anytime soon.
Look, anytime soon is not really when I want to go anyway. So
yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah.
Man, that is one of the wildest things.
Yeah, when I saw that, so Jake from Australian Aviation, one of our sister publications, I'm going to word this nicer than he did, but what
is this a crossover episode? Is this
a little bit
crossover episode?
A little bit, and here he is. No,
please, we will not inflict that upon you. We'll warn you in time.
He worded it as a man who is careening from mess up to mess up. And
I don't think he used the word mess.
He didn't.
No.
But I don't want it bleeped.
Yeah, fair
so,
enough.
But and it is really, really a perfect kind of explanation for how this is going. Yeah.
But no one thinks these are mess ups. So, we talked last week about, and this episode as well, Signal and all of that. Yeah. No one is going to be punished for it.
No.
They're going to skate out of it. And as a lot of observers say, if this happened to a Democratic appointee, they'd be gone. Like, there'd be outcry. But it's like, oh, no, they're on the good side of history. But they're not.
They're not, no. They should at least be removed. But as we saw with the Signal chat, there were many laws broken by having that chat. Yeah. One with not speaking in skiffs.
Yep.
The secure contained, whatever they were called. Skiffs, again, aren't allowed. Phones aren't allowed, meaning they were discussing this in public. Yeah. And the deleting messages, which breaks legislation about, conserving, records of these plans.
Important political records.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So not only has this been a major mess up, which, I mean, of all people to add to this chat, that was probably the worst one, but actually not worse. It could have been to, someone in Yemen.
I'm trying to think of any... Actually, yeah, good point. We accidentally added a Yemeni journalist to our bombing humanity chat. That would be...
But they've broken a number of laws, and like you said, nothing will happen.
I know, it's absolutely wild. The timeline gets weirder and weirder.
Yeah, it does.
And I feel like you and I have found ourselves... I think we mentioned this before. Dan and I have been covering cyber for like 3 years tops.
Yeah.
And what a wild time to be covering information, data security, cybercrime, all of this stuff that we talk about.
It's an equally exciting, busy, and stupid time to be discussing
As I keep saying, covering things like Trump and Musk, it's a deeply unserious time with very serious consequences.
That's a perfect way of putting it. It really is. Yeah. And so when I saw that one this morning, I just thought, take a break, man.
Chill out.
Yeah. But anyway, that's Mike Waltz, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. All right. So before we throw to our next break and go to our special guests, Dan and I have spent most of this year, which is only a few months, but having an ongoing conversation about what had appeared to be a ransomware group Babuk.
Yes.
Babuk 2.
I'm going to go with Babuk.
Babuk. Yeah, let's call them Babuk. Old school ransomware group that suddenly re-emerged, reincarnated with what looked to be the same darknet infrastructure, with the same business model, but on their first day of operation in January, they posted 60 victims who had all been listed before.
Yeah.
And it looked like a very simple, I'm air quoting again, simple data recycling operation. Like, this data's out here, we're going to try and get a second hit on it.
Yep.
As I said, Dan and I have been talking about this for a while because these guys have been claiming some serious victims.
Of a morning, almost like a, please, can I write this?
Because I was telling
this
Dan,
is
don't.
And I agree. We didn't publish it because we don't really want to write a story saying this group has breached, I don't know, big company X.
Yeah.
When not X the company, but some big company.
Not even company, government agency. And defense force agencies.
Yeah.
And like these guys, if you look at what they're claiming, they are punching so far above their weight, it's not funny.
Yeah.
But there's something weird about them.
Yeah. It's like seeing those DDoS operators that go, yippee, we got, Facebook, but Facebook didn't notice that they went down because
and no
it went
Facebook user noticed either.
But except this is different, as you've now found out.
Yeah, so I've been asking, when you hear about a new operator, we will try and reach out to our contacts in industry and go, what do you know about this? And not a lot of people have been wanting to talk about Babuk. So again, been holding off on it. And Trustwave recently published a fascinating blog post, which I must admit, every time I see it was published on April 1, it makes me worry that the article I published today is based upon a really weird, deep, unfunny April Fool's joke.
Yeah, trade publication April Fool's.
It's not a trade publication. Obvious. This is a security firm.
Well, no, yeah.
You'd imagine they wouldn't. Anyway, I will own that issue if that is a problem. But what it appears to be is these guys are actually recycling old data leaks and old ransomware attacks. And it's not as simple as it looks because what they're doing is they're gathering all the data they can and they're dropping a bit here on Telegram. They're dropping a bit here on a hacking forum. And then they're gauging, well, what's the interest here? And then they ramp up the cost.
Yep.
And then they'll go to the victim and go, hey, we're going to try and sell this data again. And so the Trustwave researcher called this data starting again.
I know the word. I'm scared to say it. I don't know if I'll get it.
Commoditization.
Commoditization.
Wow, that's a tough word. Even typing it was difficult today.
Yeah, cheers.
You know what it is? What it is working with the data you have, even if you haven't stole it, and making it worthwhile.
So are they kind of forming, for lack of a better term, combo lists? Are they collecting data from multiple sources if a company's been breached more than once?
Actually, no. Combo lists are very interesting. So if you don't know what a combo list is, a combo list is here's this data breach X, here's this data breach Y.
Or even publicly accessible data to kind of pad it out.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you combine it into here is the ultimate Australia combo list.
Yep.
Dan and I see this all the time on hacking forums, and it's not a data breach. It's just a repackaging.
And that half of the time they are advertised as new data breaches because, of course, you want to put extra pressure on that company.
Yeah. But no, these guys are... It's not quite a combo list, although it's kind of in that area. They're combing the dark web and every other leak they can find to get a hint of data, look at it, and work out, okay, if we leak this bit, if we leak that bit, and then we start to ramp up. No one even has observation on their negotiations yet with the companies they're working against.
Negotiating with. Yeah.
So... it's still a really difficult thing to report on.
Yeah, it is.
They're advertising for affiliates, ransomware affiliates. They claim to have a really powerful ransomware tool, the Babuk Locker. there are just so many red flags about their operation.
Yeah, is this a facade? Is it legit? And like we were talking about today, in terms of affiliates, right? You mentioned that this could be people who, were affiliates of other ransomware operations. They've got data,
yes,
that they've gotten from maybe something that hasn't been leaked yet, or was leaked, or was unsuccessful, or something like that.
Or the ransomware as a service operation they were with made their money, and the affiliate's gone, well, you know what? I backed this up. I'm going to make money with it a second time.
Which is we've seen before with United Health,
And also, this is all supposition.
It is, yeah.
It is such a wild west out there at the moment, and Babbock or Babbock 2, they're
Whatever
making it even crazier.
Yeah,
because these guys apparently they are very precise in their targeting. They're using a lot of social engineering. They are pressuring their second, third hand victims.
It seems like quite a sophisticated operation, ignoring the fact that it doesn't seem like they are actually doing the attacks.
Yeah.
But
it does feel like they're trying to ramp up to do that, and they're setting themselves up as we are competent, we have communication channels, we know how to pressure our victims, and they're doing it all on past data.
Well, if they're inviting affiliates to join, this could be a massive brand building exercise. Like you look at when we first started writing about this, your big groups were Alpha and Lockbit.
Yes.
And there was a brand to them. You go on their dark web leak site.
Yeah.
This is a proper operation. Whether these guys are working out of basements or not, this is a proper operation. Affiliates and cyber criminals, everyone trusts in these operations. Having a bunch of big names, whether it's data you breached or not, and a big team of affiliates is a great kind of foundation for forming something big. And that may be what they're going after.
And at the same time, it's possible all their affiliate advertisements are cover to make them look like they're an actual operating ransomware as a service operation.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible they're not doing any hacking.
Yeah.
They're just going around, getting the data which is out there and leveraging it.
It'd be interesting to see what
data, I'm using that word again.
Yeah.
Commoditization.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Well done.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, because if they're faking these affiliate ads, right, to try and thing, what would an affiliate who applies to be part of Babbock say if they go, everyone I know that wanted to be an affiliate and myself got pushed back?
Got nothing.
Yeah. This seems like a facade.
Yeah, it is so open about what that operation may be, and I still really hope it wasn't an April Fool's joke. But you're right. You're absolutely right. At some point, whatever subterfuge they're pulling will fall over.
Yeah.
But these guys are starting their negotiations at 500,000 US.
Yeah, big numbers.
And are willing to go down to 50,000. And I think that also says something. They know that they can negotiate down.
When you can drag 90% off, all of a sudden it looks like an attractive proposition.
It's a deal. It's a steal. It's a sale of the century.
A bargain.
Yeah.
And if you can get more, if you don't negotiate that far down, yippee, you've gotten $500,000.
So, whoever these people are could well be just, we're going to do this until we can't, and we are out.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, have they got an escape strategy from this? Is this a, let's take the path of least resistance, a term I love in this industry, a path of least resistance for as long as we can, and as soon as it gets hard, let's get out of there with the money we've made.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the TrustWave researcher I was reading about today is like, this is an evolution in the ransomware landscape, and it kind of is, but it also feels like this is a trick you get away with once.
Yeah.
And these guys have lucked onto this business model, and I can't imagine that'll work beyond that.
No.
That said, who knows? I mean, it's
only time will tell how it evolves.
It's a wild west out there.
It really is.
All right. We are going to throw to another break, and then we shall have some really, really, trust me, fascinating guests on. Thank you for listening. We'll chat soon. And welcome back to the Cyber Uncut podcast. My name's David Hollingworth. Just a reminder, I'm deputy editor of Cyber Daily, and I've swapped out my colleague, Daniel Croft, for two rather fascinating guests. From the US, we have Luke Dembosky, partner and co-chair of data strategy and security at US law firm Debevoise and Plimpton. Did I murder that?
Yeah, a little bit. No, Debevoise.
Debevoise. Okay, I always get confused with that one. And I'm also joined by, from Clayton Utz, Brenton Steenkamp, their head of cyber and data governance. How are you both today?
Doing well. Thank you for having us on.
What exactly are you doing here in sunny Australia?
Well, my dear friend Brenton here and the Clayton Utz team are doing some exciting things with their cyber practice, and they invited me to be part of it. So we're doing some meetings and speaking tours, webinars. Mm-hmm. So it's a chance to compare notes and learn from each other on cyber issues.
Yeah.
And I think having Luke here in town or in Australia, it's a great occasion for us just to share, past practices and what's trendy. Luke and I have had the opportunity to have met in Europe when I was based there in the Netherlands, and we did a few gigs in our past in Paris and Amsterdam with the FBI and the like, and some good memories.
I'm glad to hear it. Luke, you have quite the career behind you. I mean, working with the FBI, but you've been with the DOJ, you've been a federal prosecutor, diplomatic roles in Moscow. That sounds like it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind tour. I think I've just been at it a long time and been in the right place at the right time, been very fortunate. I had been a young attorney just doing typical court work, litigation work, and then took an opportunity in my home city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to be a federal prosecutor. And they threw me in the cyber unit. They said, you're the youngest person here. You must know all about computers, which my wife is actually a technologist and thought that was a little bit funny and scary for the country. But they trained us very well. It turned out to be an amazing place. They built that same summer I started, 2002, they built the first public-private cyber fusion center in the world, the NCFTA. And we had Carnegie Mellon as our national CERT team, computer emergency response team for the country. And so I had these tremendous national assets in my backyard.
Yeah, okay, that really is quite an impressive background. Now, you're here in Australia to chat to CEOs and boards about the trends that you're seeing and how they translate here into Australia, aren't you? That's why you're out here. So I thought that might be a great place to start talking about corporate risk and governance. So your firm has been seeing some really interesting trends emerging in ransomware operators, and they're now directly targeting and harassing executives of companies, and even going so far as to take advantage of corporate events and big deals and big moments of disruption, and that's when they're making their plays. So what exactly are you seeing in that regard, and do you guys think it's going to come here to Australia eventually?
Yeah, it's evolved tremendously. I think the first ransom cases I worked were in the 2013, 2014 range, still as a prosecutor, and they targeted individuals to lock up their home computers, small businesses. And then it gradually organized into corporate attacks, a really full-fledged organized crime. The groups became these large monolithic enterprises like Maze back at the time. And they were a one-stop shop. They did the hacking, they did the negotiating, they did, if they were taking some data as part of their leverage, they would do that. They would code their own malware. They did the cash out. What we've seen over time evolve is a whole ecosystem spring up to support the groups. So most of them don't even do the original hacking now. They go through access brokers. There are data storage people. But to your point, the latest iteration is a real spike in pure data extortion. So we're seeing a bit less of a rise in encryption cases, more smash and grab data theft. And when that's your only leverage point, you want to try to add something else to it. And what they've chosen, to your question, David, is to target executives, in some cases their families, other employees of the company. They'll send harassing texts and emails. They'll make phone calls. And eventually they extend it out of your walls to maybe customers whose data is mixed up in what's there. And it's to try to really add pressure to force the company to pay.
Yeah.
And I think the let's call it the rise of public information on social media and private information on social media has just escalated let's call it the rise of issues like scams and business email compromise to a level where it's not only the executives, but it's you and I on the street and at home that are being exposed on various levels. So these criminals, should I say, and for lack of a better word, some of these threat actors are using the same mechanisms. If it's not for ransomware or data extortion, to get to individuals, be it executives.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about the targeting of individuals and customers outside of the walls. Something we've started to see recently here in Australia are attacks on healthcare orgs where we're seeing CCTV footage from inside the practice getting leaked and actual patients being named of what's happening on the camera. So it is getting very, very personal, isn't it? It's no longer this criminal goes after corporate entity. It's now very, very individual.
Yeah, and I think if you unpack that from a psychological aspect is what has changed? So the intent around monetary gain or if there's a personal gain has not changed. There's still a criminal mindset at the back end, and we always need to keep that in mind, that be it the threat actors themselves or these types of groups that we encounter will do whatever they can to get to that end goal.
Of that final payday.
Absolutely. And I think that has given rise to more and more of these issues coming to the forefront. And technology is obviously aiding that as well.
Well, to your point, Brenton, I mean, it's really exploiting the intersection of our business, our work, and our personal lives. I mean, we're getting on home routers and going through VPN to the office, and to the extent they can compromise a home device, they can collect credentials. We've had one group take highly sensitive personal photos from an executive's personal laptop, and start to publish them to family and friends, publish them to executives at the company, and really humiliate the person as a pressure point. In another case, it was extremely embarrassing comments that someone had saved, comments of a senior leader of the company. And that person was the same person charged with ultimately deciding whether to pay the ransom. So they're kind of compromised. Yeah. And so we drove the issue forward to the board to really get the board's endorsement of what was going on and add some independence to it. And is that going to come to Australia? Can Australian executives expect that kind of personalized attention from cyber criminals? I should certainly hope so. It seems to have gotten traction in the U.S. I would think it's going to come this way. Hopefully, Australian executives will be better prepared. What we're urging people to do is pay some attention to your personal self-defense. It's not like you're on the edge of the arena watching the fight, making decisions for the company. This extends into your home, your devices, your travel, having your family, contact information in your phone, making it very easy for them to reach out. We've had them text minor children, call people's schools, hire somebody to film a video of children going in and out of the elementary school, send a clip of the child. Yeah, like that's what you expect from a Hollywood crime. Yeah, right? It's a terror campaign to the individual, really. Yeah,
I think it, David, it goes beyond just understanding your own risk profile. Is extending that to your friends, your next of kin, and more importantly, your family. So it doesn't help to build a defense wall just around your work environment, particularly if you're an executive traveling abroad, or even traveling in most instances. What are you doing? What's your risk profile look like? Your digital risk profile I'm referring to. How exposed are you? Are you safe when you go to a cafe and sit down? Are you using the public Wi-Fi? Or are you taking extra measures to mitigate that risk? Yeah. So it's being conscious about that. And how does that relate to your family as well? It's only the weakest link.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I've certainly seen instances where clearly somebody is keeping personal files on a work system, and so suddenly you have family birth, medical certificates and things like that being part of these big data breaches, and it's like that's not corporate data, that's your family data, that's your child and a sickness they're going through, and yeah, I guess you want to be careful about what data you store on what devices and be aware of it as well.
Well, if you look at personal files, personal information being saved and shared within the work environment brings also a new level of risk. If you look about your tax file details, you want to use your work environment to maybe communicate with your tax advisor. Well, if that information is in a public share folder or a work share folder, if it is exposed, it brings in a new set of liabilities to not only to you but also to the organization. Yeah,
there's a lot to be aware of. Speaking of things to be aware of, other threats that you're seeing, Luke, emerge are things such as infiltration and insider-enabled attacks. Again, can you expand on that, and are we going to see that trend locally?
Yeah, well, the insider threat has been around a long time. Excuse my jet-lagged voice, but the newest iteration really has been what North Korea launched during COVID. It's incredibly prolific. They brilliantly launched a program to insinuate IT workers remotely into the hiring practices of certainly U.S. companies, to the point where now the FBI and our Homeland Security Department have basically issued an edict that if you're of any size and scale and you're outsourcing IT, you have one or more North Koreans working for you. It's almost a given. So it's incredibly challenging because people outsource a lot of the vetting of the people coming in, and those people subcontract. And so there's a chain where people have ceded control of those gaining access. Remote work has, on the one hand, been a wonderful thing. It's given a lot of flexibility, expanded the talent base, but the surface area goes up. So my team has 17 or 18 of those cases. Some cases, more than a dozen remote IT infiltrators are part of it. So it sort of brings together national security issues with more traditional insider threat issues, range of considerations, the hiring process, procurement process. Thank you. That's made it a more challenging thing, bringing back an old school threat with a new flavor to it.
Yeah. I think it was quite amazing because when KnowBe4, data privacy and security company, quite honestly and openly went, oh yeah, we fell for this. We hired a fake North Korean hire. It's amazing that can happen in this day and age, but it's happening quite common, isn't it?
Well, I think it points to the question of understanding your threat environment and understanding where your crown jewels are, so to speak. And what's at risk, what's at stake within the organization. A number of organizations globally are moving towards embedding a threat program within, so really to combat this insider threat risk. But it's also understanding what is happening elsewhere, not only locally, but also globally.
There's another variation of it, David, that we've seen just involving job outsourcing. So we've had situations where employees of companies have used a tool like Zoom and just left it open, and it acts like RDP to allow someone to remote in and perform the job for that person on the weekend, maybe get them ahead or catch them up on the work. They pay a small sum to this stranger to the organization who remotes in and does their job. And so we're seeing these types of tools, whether it's tied to any particular nation state or not, or just outsourcing, dramatically raising the risk profile, to Brenton's point, for a lot of companies.
It's not an uncommon event now to see organizations hiring individuals, particularly in the security domain, to run this insider threat program. We know of a few globally, and I think that is probably on the radar for a number of organizations who don't have it. within to understand what that risk profile is and what do they want to mitigate in doing so. One of the organizations I worked for a number of years ago, it was an IT operator who was not promoted within the organization. This employee was disgruntled, and his way of paying back to the organization was by embedding a malicious code within the point of sales within the organization and caused damage as a result. They could not trade because the point of sales weren't working. Yeah. So does this risk exist? Yes. Is it evolving as technology evolves? Absolutely. So more needs to be done to understand what that profile looks like within the organizations. And I think it goes without saying, talking about outsourced providers, it does change then from a compliance perspective, but also from a risk management perspective. What are you doing differently to understand how you bring on your third parties? How do you actually outsource your HR onboarding process? What is the criteria that has been embedded to actually bring people on board, be it on a short-term or long-term basis? Is that the same as 5 years ago? If it is, a question mark, because of the risk that has changed.
Because the rest of the landscape has evolved around it and you need to keep up. So you can't use yesterday's tools to mitigate tomorrow's risks. It's a continuous evolving process. So given the breadth and depth of the threat landscape, and we've only touched on a handful of things involved, what kind of mindset do executives and board members and C-suite operators need to bring to, from the ground up, mitigate these kind of threats?
Well, fairly or unfairly, I think they need almost to think with a little bit of counterintelligence savvy. When I worked in an embassy, the embassy in Moscow, as we say, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're under the microscope in everything that you do. And so thinking as an executive holistically about your devices, surface area you're creating with your family and your contact information, intermingled personal information, as Brent said, melded in. So we're spending a lot of time with senior leadership teams and boards to train them a little bit on cyber self-defense, starting with awareness of the kinds of threats we're seeing their colleagues experience across industry, and really trying to equip them with some practical tools to be situationally aware, manage surface area, identify and be able to correlate different aberrant things that are occurring so they don't just brush them off. There's a cottage industry that's formed up in the States around their vendors that provide these types of services. One of them, for example, is Black Cloak, and they seem to be quite popular these days with this surge in threats, where you'll agree as the entity to buy a package of monitoring, detection, training for a certain number of your executives. The other thing that kind of goes a little bit hand in hand in the incident context is out-of-band communications, having alternative communication platforms where the environment may be compromised. And then the last piece that I'll mention is we're seeing a lot of use of deepfakes, both voice and audio in our cases are becoming increasing. So impersonations of the executive, not just like a fake LinkedIn page and all of that, and everything Brenton said, I fully support and endorse on that. But in terms of the direct reports and people in the organization who are going to just do whatever the CEO or head of the organization says based on seeing them on a Zoom or a Teams call or hearing their voice on the phone. So we're training help desks, people initiating wire transfers to really be aware that these simulations are so good, and there needs to be a protocol that you follow in every case, even when you're being told by someone you think is the leader not to follow it.
I think stress testing that risk is goes without saying, critical. There's been a number of these matters where, just as a result of a deep fake, we've heard about it in the press, organizations losing funds. It's happened in the US, it's happened here in Asia Pac. But has that risk been tested? Has that muscle memory been embedded? And it's one of my clients always used the phrase of, when you that deer in the headlights, how long do you stay there? Depends on your training beforehand.
Yeah.
You always rise to your level of, not your experience, to the level of your training. And that's a key thing to remember.
And that requires also not just a top-down look at cybersecurity and dealing with threats, but also a bottom-up, because everybody in the company needs to be aware of that. So how do you get around something like training fatigue? Because I know I've been in companies where, you get the regular phishing test emails come out and it's just so obvious. And you get this kind of, they're trying to trick us again. And so no one's engaging with it.
Well, I think that's a good question you've asked. And that's if I may interject here, Luke, I always use the phrase of, well, we've always heard the top down, but what about the bottom up? So in my world, it's about bringing that training to the point of your risk. So what I mean by that is, if it's a high risk area or high risk process, make the training very specific to that process. So if it is in the payments arena of where the authorized person is going to make the payment, test that from a vulnerability perspective and ring fence your capability in that regard and ensure that this high risk training is embedded. So when the executive travels to a high risk country, does he or she know what they need to be aware of? We spoke about your communications devices, but in terms of how to engage, where to connect, are you using your same digital device, be it your computer or your iPad or whatever it may be, to connect? It's understanding the risk profile from that perspective. Yeah. So it's not that top down. It's very specific to the risk, and if I may say, it's protecting your crown jewels.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
We've had success making it stick in the training by actually doing simulations and building deepfakes into them. So my team, I've surrounded myself by a lot of smart, young, up-and-coming stars in our firm. And I'm gratified to report, as a dad of two daughters, that probably more than half of them are women.
That's good.
Women technologists, women who, used to reverse engineer nation state malware for, Google and so forth. And now we're very thrilled to have some of them on our team. And they love to do a deep fake as part of one of our tabletops or simulations. Of course, we get the client's consent, but we've shocked some of the people we've trained by having, someone appear on a Teams or Zoom call as part of the training, and they just assume the person is themselves participating because of what they see and hear. And then we'll have the actual, CEO or president of the company join 15 minutes later, and they're side by side on the screen. That sticks. I mean, that you don't forget.
Yeah, that's an experience you don't forget. Yeah.
So,
it's more caught than taught, hey?
Yeah. People, they don't want to be the one to let the company down. And I think rather than a dry set of points in an annual training page, bringing it to life through that sort of thing is key. I train our help desk at our law firm every year, along with our CISO. And basically the message was, you can't believe what you see and hear. And I don't care who is screaming at you to port a new token over to a new device because they lost something and now they're on deadline. So it's almost like you have to stop thinking about yourself as the help desk and be the unhelped desk. You have to be a little Seinfeld, a little soup Nazi in terms of allowing just anybody in because they're yelling. Yeah. So it's a healthy skepticism. They want to be they are a key part of any organization. They're the people guarding the fort. They don't have the big title, but they're key gatekeepers. And so making them understand how much they're appreciated, but equipping them with the tools and the backing so that if they hold the line and they say to the partner, whoever it is yelling at them, no, I have to follow this protocol. I'm sorry. They know that their job is going to be there the next day, that the organization has their back.
It's very similar to what we're seeing from banks and financial institutions in educating their customers. No, we will never send you a link in an SMS, or we'll never ask for these details. So I'm guessing companies really should be following that process as well, setting out clear rules of how executives will communicate with their staff and their expectations and things they won't do. So there are clear red flags.
Yeah, it's we've had a number of deep fakes arise in our cases, resulting in large wire diversions, and they have in common, to your point, David, almost always that someone is asking you to do something unexpected. They're asking you to keep it quiet and not tell others. The implication is that you're supposed to set aside ordinary channels and protocols and approval processes, and so you're isolated in doing something out of the ordinary. And the flags start to add up. And so training people through that, walking them through little vignettes or scenarios, I think empowers them to spot this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you tie that back to the actual situation or the occurrence of that event, there's always one common denominator in terms of the pressure that goes with it. So I
was going to bring that up, actually, yes.
Yeah, you could actually tie that back to a fraud triangle, but the opportunity, the pressure, and then obviously the rationalization around that process is quite opportune, and it's really going through that, I would call it pressure cooker situation, and stress testing that to avoid it.
And it's interesting because with all of these advances in technology that we're talking about, it's still those classic examples of social engineering, applying the pressure, saying, overloading somebody with information and telling them, no, it's got to just get done now. And so they do it and snap.
Yeah. Years gone by, you had the old Nigerian 419 scams, and you could pick it up quite easily with some of the spelling mistakes on some of these emails, and there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and
if it's too good to be true, it always is.
But today we don't see that; it's much more sophisticated
because we now have AI helping the people writing these scams.
And it goes without saying. Yeah. So it's tying in your social media profile. It's looking at what are the common denominators? Who are your friends? Where are you flying to? You spoke about deals. What do you keep safe, and what do you make public?
Yeah. It's so I had a conversation with, or my colleague had a conversation with a medical center that got hit by a ransomware attack, and the person on the other end of the phone was telling us with a straight face, "Oh, I don't think anyone can take advantage of this kind of information if it gets published." And we were just dumbstruck, because if you have someone's medical history and profile, you can now call them up and act from a position of authority. Oh, well, you went in and had this procedure here and that procedure there. And, oh, unfortunately, your finances aren't quite, so can you send through a payment, that kind of stuff. So, when you see this information get leaked, it's going to lead to further downstream incidents as people start to comb through all this data. Isn't that right?
Well, I think it goes beyond that as well, in terms of we see our regulators now taking a much more onerous view around organizations, looking at your data and what procedures are embedded to protect that data. But I would even go as far to say, in terms of risk assessing the information and measuring that up towards your control environment is key as well. So to your point, if I have A, B, and C of your PII or whatever confidential information that may be, the threat actors are not looking at it in isolation. They're looking at the whole picture. And so when they bring that together, does that actually elevate the risk profile of that information or data? And that's the question to ask. How does your adequate procedures tie up to that risk profile?
And one of the sort of not so sexy ways of countering all of this that we're talking about is really data minimization, urging our clients to, if you can't delete it or purge it, at least archive it. Don't have, for example, 2 to 5 years of email in your inbox and your sent items. Don't make it, so easy that every little business email compromise is a major breach. So segmentation, a little bit of inconvenience for the sake of security, role-based access, So especially if I'm in, to your example, like a medical services organization, chances are, for most of them, at least in the States, our hospital systems run on pretty thin margins. So
I'd say it's pretty common. Yeah.
Big breach is catastrophic for them because they don't have the money to throw the kitchen sink at it and pay a fortune in ransom. So it's whatever ounces of prevention upfront, will avoid the issue and reduce the surface areas is crucial.
I can't agree more on that one.
Yeah, you got my vote. So I'd like to round up by, we've got a lot of experience sitting around the table here, not counting me, of course. What do you think is coming down the pike? We see these threats evolve constantly, and they seem to be evolving faster than ever, even in the 2.5 years that I've been covering this as a journalistic beat. What do we think is going to continue to evolve in these threats and the processes of these actors, and how can we continue to keep ahead of them?
Yeah, I think that the tools are getting so good and they're trickling down to less and less sophisticated users can now use AI to code exploits. So it's something that AI is very good at. And so a lot of things are becoming automated, and the game is really about how we've stored data in the first place, the layers that we've put around it. We're not going to catch as many things, I think, at the perimeter perhaps as we used to. There's hopes for AI to aid in defense, but I think it'll continue to be an arms race in that regard. Geopolitically, there's a bit of a possibility that Europe could be more heavily targeted right now. If Europe has the impression that the U.S. administration is not happy with them, or countries harboring hackers like those in Russia may decide it's open season on European targets, for example. So the geopolitical winds have shifted to some extent. The technology is creating better weapons and tools for people. There's a fear that government agencies, healthcare systems, and others in critical infrastructure won't be able to keep up. So what we're coaching people through is really crisis planning, how to take a big disaster off the table. You're going to have email compromise. You're going to have devices at the perimeter that are compromised vulnerabilities. How do you remove the big day, the big disaster day? So just an example, in the energy sector, clients of ours run not only IT networks, but they run operational technology or OT, SCADA systems. These could be pipelines, it could be nuclear, other things. And so crisis planning around, when do you decouple these things? Moving big picture further and further, as we say, left of boom, to plan for those kinds of big contingencies.
Yeah.
So you're fighting the battles on the endpoints, you're fighting the AI and deepfake risks and things, but you've really planned from a crisis standpoint to take disaster off the table.
Yeah.
Critical to Luke's point, I think from my perspective as well, understand what your critical assets are, risk plan them, and keep those crown jewels as safe as possible. But also think about what you're not thinking about. So, and what you're not expecting. A crisis plan is always around what you know, but what about what you don't know? If you came to Ireland 3 years ago and you told them that the whole of their healthcare would have been disabled from the World Wide Web, what's that impact? That wasn't part of their crisis planning. So expect the unexpected, to Luke's point, and how do you mitigate that risk and flex the muscle in that regard? So I think it's a continuous process. But I think also to emphasize, it's also not done in isolation. It's teamwork throughout the organization, and also with your trusted vendors and your partners, with government, with the ASD's office or the National Cyber Security Center as well.
Yeah.
So it's a continuous point to work together, because this is not and I think to emphasize this point, this is not an attack on a organization. Effectively, particularly if it's state-driven, it's an attack on the nation as a whole. And it's got an economic impact across the board. It's not isolated in many instances.
Yeah.
It's got a ripple effect. If I think about SolarWinds, the impact, I think, of the whole, from Midwest downwards had a tremendous impact on everyone in the States.
And then, of course, you've got the reputational side of it.
That goes
and then the
without
impact
saying.
of people not feeling they can trust those critical structure entities. Yeah.
Part of it's going to be a mindset shift, David. I think it's no longer whether you got breached. It's how you handle it. It's how you think about it. And so we're hoping the public, the media, and regulators are moving in that direction too, that they will appreciate transparency. I can tell you in the trenches, it's been music to my ears where we've represented someone, say like a breached law firm, another firm, and we've been on with their customers and them to be very transparent. And at the end of the incident where we're wrapping up, to hear their clients say to them, you came into this with some goodwill, but you actually left this incident with more.
Yeah.
None of us wish this would happen, but you proved to us who you were. You proved your character. You made choices in the best interest of your customer. You handled things responsibly and played the long game. So I think that's kind of the mentality shift. There's micro mentality shifts. We spoke about executives just understanding that you're in the game, you're on the playing field, so to speak. On supply chain, no longer just pulling the lever on a generic solution, even if it's the most expensive one that all your competitors are, because that will have the highest risk profile. It'll have the highest target on its back. And so how do we customize and layer in our own adjustments to that program, so we're not just in the soup when everyone else is breached as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think one of the best outcomes I can think of when I'm covering a company that's been hacked or had a data breach is there's nothing worse for them if in my article it says we contacted them and they've not gotten back to us. Whereas I think if somebody says, oh no, we've done all this, we've done all that, we're contacting people, if they're open about it, as you said, you're going to get a better outcome from your customers because you still appear trustworthy.
Yeah.
No one blames a bank for being robbed.
When we run simulations and when we do actual incidents, and we're running anywhere from 8 to 12 or 14 incidents at a time worldwide on our team, the area most challenged, the toughest area is communications, crisis communications. Your internal stakeholders all of a sudden can't log in or are out on social media potentially talking about it if you're not giving any information, to your point. All sorts of staging and sequencing to different stakeholders, everyone from the board to regulators to different customer groups. How you manage that is the trickiest thing.
Absolutely.
So a board will say, a client will say, we want to invite you in, Luke, and your team to run a simulation on pay and no pay in a ransom situation. And that's great. It gets us in the door, but that's probably the fourth or so most difficult aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, communications, operational risk, a whole bunch of other tough strategic decisions are far harder in the incident than that.
Yeah.
I can't echo that more. And, we've seen a number of these organizations within Australia, Luke, where I don't think the communication strategy or plan around how they engage with the public has actually gone to their wishes. And more needs to be done in that regard. So it's not only understanding who is going to speak, but what is going to be spoken, to what extent, and has that been tried and tested, and with whom. And that is fundamental to your point, a whole process that needs to come into play, particularly around crisis management, but also responding to some of these incidents.
Yeah, it may sound, when you pile up all of these risks, it may sound futile, but actually at this stage in my career, after 23 years doing this kind of thing, you start to see patterns of what good looks like. So best practices have emerged. If you study the differences between well-handled and poorly handled incidents, you won't find that those were bad people or not smart people. Those are common, those are common denominators for good and bad outcomes. So what were the difference makers? It's this kind of prep that Brenton and and is speaking to, I think that lays the foundation for success. So there's a playbook of handling these things, and we've seen the good and bad, and enough lessons have emerged that I think the bright side of this is if you plan a little bit ahead, you can take the sting out of a lot of what happens.
Yeah. So I think there you go. It's the old Boy Scout motto: be prepared, huh?
It's tried and true, and I think it's no different. The tools are going to keep changing. The tech, AI, the threat groups will keep morphing. The geopolitical swirl will keep changing. But rise above that. Be cognizant of those things because they do affect the prep. But I think the overall mindset and approach, to your point of preparation, is really the key.
Yeah,
I think being prepared is probably the answer for everything, and how you prepare is the differentiator.
I could not agree more. Luke, Brenton, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening. This was a really, really fun episode to record. Dan and I were really, really struggling to work out, Babook, how does Babook even work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I hope you got something out of it. Please sign up to all of our socials. We are on LinkedIn.
We are on LinkedIn.
Twitter?
We're on
X,
X. Yes. We're
yes.
on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Yeah. All the classics.
Yeah, all the classics. I'm on Mastodon, also on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn.
So follow us personally. We won't hold it against you. Hopefully you won't hold that against us. Sign up to our newsletter. Thank you again, and we will talk with you, at you, next week.
Yeah, next week. Looking forward to it.
Bye.
See ya.